Hello, everyone. I'm Daryl, Cady, CEO of Hospice of Southern Maine. In the hospice line of work, there are not many opportunities to talk about something so innovative and exciting, so I'm really happy to be with all of you. Today, I'd like to share our story of how we came to partner with Embodied Labs on a 45-minute virtual reality experience about end of life, and how we use it to educate our employees and to improve our care for patients and their families. As an overview, today I will cover some highlights about hospice in the United States, virtual reality, why it's effective, and how and when we use it in our healthcare setting. I'll show part of the VR experience, but in 2D, not 3D. And I'll also talk about learning outcomes, the positive impact this VR experience has had for us and those who view it. In case you're not familiar with hospice, it focuses on comfort, not a cure. It's a subspecialty, just as orthopedics or cardiology are subspecialties. It's a philosophy of end-of-life care. There is a whole team caring for both the patient and their family. Physicians, nurses, social workers, chaplains, hospice aides, bereavement support, and volunteers. All costs related to hospice care are covered by Medicare and most private insurances. More and more people who are eligible for it, and there must be a 6-month prognosis, are choosing it. And it increasingly is becoming the preferred care for end of life. And there's lots of research about how it improves the quality of life at end of life for both the patient and their families. In fact, a Massachusetts General Hospital study in 2015 showed that stage 4 lung cancer patients who chose hospice lived an average of 25% longer than those who did not. So what is virtual reality? It is a believable, interactive, first-person 3D world you can explore and really feel there, both emotionally and physically. I'm guessing many of you have tried some kind of virtual reality experience. You really do feel like you're there, don't you? In the case of our VR experience, the viewer embodies a fictitious person named Clay Crowder, a 66-year-old veteran with stage 4 incurable lung cancer. But before I get into the actual VR, let me briefly tell you how it came to be developed and our role in its creation. The founder of Embodied Labs is Carrie Shaw, on the left in this photo. She's pictured here with her mom, who had macular degeneration and early onset Alzheimer's. She was the inspiration for the company. Her combined diagnoses opened Carrie's eyes to the possibility that if caregivers could step in the shoes of their patients, they could become more effective. Embodied Labs is the company she created and the virtual reality experience that we use. They believe in helping users see the world through the eyes of the people you care for. Carrie started Embodied Labs in 2016 to create immersive or VR experiences. When Embodied Labs was introduced to us in 2017, they had already produced 2 VR experiences and were planning their 3rd production on end-of-life conversations. When I first heard about their proposal, I was a little skeptical. End of life and VR, it seemed an odd combination. But as you'll see, it was the perfect combination. And this technology has turned out to be the perfect and very impactful learning tool for us. So I said yes. And very quickly, Embodied Labs sent their team to our Gosnell Memorial Hospice House and got a firsthand perspective of the patients' and families' experience. They took their immersion information, along with interviews from other experts, back to Los Angeles to finish production. The Clay Lab, as it's called, was released in 2018. As you'll learn more about this in a minute, Clay is the name of the main character. In the short time since then, Embodied Labs has produced more than 20 immersive experiences. The new topics include elder safety, home health assessments, social isolation, trans health, and LGBT aging, and vision and hearing loss, to name a few. All of these experiences have been developed with the guidance of healthcare professionals, give a unique and in-depth perspective on aging, and can be experienced in person using a VR headset or online. Throughout the years and the development of these VR experiences, they have steadfastly held to their overarching question: if healthcare providers in training could step into the shoes of patients and other members of the care team, would this make them more effective providers and caregivers? From our experience, we believe the answer is yes. But why? Because VR uniquely speeds up the learning process 4 times faster than traditional methods and 4 times more focused than e-learning. It allows viewers to go inside and outside the body. You're embodying a different individual, so it inherently allows the viewer to try on a different perspective. And because the embodying aspect, your brain is tricked into experiencing this as real. For example, pilots, they use VR before they actually fly a real plane. Surgeons use VR before operating on real patients. And oftentimes, customer service employees use VR to deal with difficult customers before really dealing with difficult customers. So in the hospice setting, this can help everyone to step into the shoes of those we're caring for in order to feel and empathize with their emotions and accelerate positive caregiving outcomes. When we facilitate the modules with people taking this virtual experience, there are 4 basic steps. They're prepare, embody, reflect, and apply. So prepare gets you ready for the experience, and you start by completing a pre-assessment questionnaire. And some of the questions include, am I comfortable talking about issues related to end of life? Do I feel confident in my ability to provide care to someone in the last months of that person's life? What's my view of hospice care? And how might I feel if I was told that I had a disease that's incurable? And then embody. It's time to put on the VR goggle and the headset. Reflect is, after viewing the experience, viewers answer a post-experience survey with the same questions as pre-survey. And we talk about what was learned, what you understood or didn't, and what you might understand, and encourage you to ask any questions you might have. And then apply is the part of the discussion, talking about any new insights or understandings. And we would ask about any plans you may have to change practices based on what you experienced. The VR experience we will be watching is called the Clay Lab, End of Life Conversations. Before I demonstrate, let me give you a brief overview. Once you put on the goggles, if you were doing this real time, which you'll see next, you will become or embody Clay Crowder. He's a 66-year-old veteran with stage 4 incurable lung cancer. You can see his arms and his legs. So again, Clay is a 66-year-old man. And as you can see me, I am a woman and I'm petite. He's a very tall gentleman. But when you put this on, you will see his arms and his legs. I would see them. And they're hairy men's arms, and I'm a petite woman. So you become or embody him. As Clay, the other people you will see and interact with would include your wife and 2 adult daughters, your doctor, presumably an oncologist, an ER nurse, a hospice social worker, and a home program hospice nurse. And as strange as it may sound, you'll also interact with an iPhone. You see, because of your advanced cancer, you, Clay, you can't speak, so you use an iPhone to text, including a very poignant question that you'll have for the doctor. On the left, you see here is the VR headset with visual and audio aspects. And yes, the iPhone that you as Clay use to communicate to your family, physicians, and others during the experience. So let's take a look. Normally each part would take about 6 to 10 minutes. And while we don't have time today to show each one, I'll explain part 1 and 2, and then I'll show you video of part 3. As I mentioned, there are 3 parts. In part 1, you, again as Clay, meet with your doctor, your wife, and 1 adult daughter to receive the news that there are no longer effective curative treatments for your advanced cancer. The family dynamics are quite interesting. The reaction of his daughter and his wife are quite different. The wife is calm and supportive, and the daughter is anxious and reactive. And these reactions may be similar to the dynamics you would see with patients and families in hospice care. And it's in this video, toward the end, in this part, that Clay participates in the conversation by texting a very simple 2-word question: how long? In part 2, Clay has a fall related to his disease progression, which sends him to the emergency room. In the ER, Clay and his other adult daughter have a very important conversation with the ER nurse about hospice. And this part ends with Clay going home on hospice. And the photo you see here is Clay communicating by phone with his daughter, wife, and hospice social worker while they're sitting at the kitchen table. In part 3, which is called Last Days, the setting is Clay's bedroom, and he's actively dying. His family is gathered around him, and a home hospice nurse is caring for him and answering questions for the family. There are some very touching and emotional moments here. There is also a virtual look inside Mr. Crowder's body, showing how it reacts before and after pain medication is administered. After he dies, the virtual experience illustrates postmortem care. And then Clay is draped in an American flag as he leaves the house, because remember, he's a military veteran. So here is the clip.
His breathing is more irregular now.
He's not moving his jaw. Do we need to turn him again? His face is like purple.
Well, since we turned him recently, we need to let the secretions from the lungs come out. There's a lot of rattle further down there.
Oh, his fingers are really purple. Was he able to urinate when you took him to the toilet yesterday?
A little. That was 2 days ago. I honestly think that the diaper is the way to go instead of the catheter.
Do we need to give him a feeding tube or something?
At this point, there's a natural process that's occurring. Anything that we do in terms of tubes or lines will just get in the way of that process. At this stage, he's really not hungry.
Yeah, we need to focus on his comfort. He said he didn't want tubes.
Right, I know. I just don't want him to be uncomfortable if he has to pee.
Oh, your eyes are open. Good morning, Clay. How are you feeling?
Oh, when you stepped out yesterday, Mimi put another diaper on Dad.
He was clean and dry this morning, and we do have extra briefs here if he needs them. You look a little cramped. Love, I'm just going to adjust your pillow a bit here, okay? Just for a hot second, this might be uncomfortable. There.
He's been feeling so cold to me.
I know. Have you felt his feet? I'm gonna go get a blanket.
You should ask your mother to come in here. I told her I'd get her when it's time.
Oh, do you want me to get her now?
Yes.
Hey, Mimi just said that it'll be long now. No, it's happening pretty fast now. Okay. I love you.
This is something we ask everyone. Have you told him that it's all right for him to go?
Yes, I did. It's okay, honey. You've got your girls here.
The moving breeze and starts for the blue ocean. She's an object of beauty and strength.
Here you go.
I stand and watch her until, at length, she hangs like a speck of white cloud, just where the sea and sky come to mingle with each other. Then someone at my side says, "There she is gone." Gone where?
Sometimes they wait until everyone leaves.
Gone from my sight. That is all.
Your body now, all right? We're going to bathe you, put some lotion on your skin, and then put your uniform on, okay?
So let's pause for a minute, as that was a lot. And I've actually lost count as to how many times I've watched this, but it still can be emotional for me, as I'm sure it could have been for many of you. So people often ask how we use this. It's primarily two ways. We educate our employees and we educate the community. We, for educating our staff, feel this has had a positive impact on our care. While we took a brief pause during COVID, All new staff experience the Clay Lab. It allows them to stand in the shoes of the patient, family, and doctor. And it's especially helpful for understanding the entire experience prior to entering hospice. For example, the physician conversation and the ER visit. As far as educating the community, we show it to anyone in the community who wants to view it. It can be shown in individual or group mode, and we have also shared the resource with other types of agencies to help them educate their employees. We feel the more people who understand end of life, the better. One thing we do get asked occasionally is if we use it with families of patients who are currently in our care, and the answer is no. They're already living this experience, and we have real people as resources to support them and answer their questions. It's a great training tool for some of the finer points of hospice care. For example, these are a few of the topics that the VR touches on: understanding the serious illness conversation, how falls and ER visits can precede hospice, learning how to manage the family dynamics that you saw between the two daughters, and finally, allowing for a quality end-of-life experience wherever home is. So is it working? We feel yes. The post-viewing survey data showed that there was a 95% increase in understanding the perspectives of older adults or increased empathy for patients. Viewers reported feeling less helpless about end-of-life conversations, less fear, more peaceful, more empowered, and less sad. We're seeing many other unique benefits to using the VR as well. It enhances the quality of care, onboarding new staff effectively. It helps with retention, increased staff engagement and satisfaction, decreased caregiver burnout, reduced errors, gained competitive advantage with this unique education. We're the only hospice in our area with access to this resource, and it has truly helped to set us apart in our community. So I hope this was a helpful presentation. If you have any questions or would like to continue the conversation, please feel free to contact me at this number or email address. Thank you so much.
Hello and welcome all. My name is Dr. Priyanka Vandersman. I'm a research fellow for the LDAC project, and I work within the Flinders University in Adelaide, which is located in the south side of Australia. And today I will be talking a little bit about the work that I've been involved with, which looks at developing, integrating, and implementing various kinds of novel digital technologies for the Australian aged care sector. So to give you a bit of an overview, in this session, I will cover three key things. The first I'll talk about would be palliative care and end-of-life care aspect of aged care and why technology may have a role to play in this setting. I will then share with you some of the examples of technology-driven work that I've been doing within the LDAC project and share some of my experiences and learnings of the process. And finally, I will be sharing with you some of the broad understandings and learning of the process of what happens after a product is built and we've achieved the first round of integration work. But first things first, let's talk about some of the key definitions and terms. So I would like to begin by, sort of talking about palliative care. So palliative care is an approach that improves the quality of life of people who have been diagnosed with incurable illnesses. We also need to remember that palliative care is not just about the care that is provided in the final stages of life. It's actually something that is more like an approach to care that can be offered to a person from the time of their initial diagnosis all the way through to the point where they're actively dying, and beyond that in terms of support for the families. But you may ask, well, why should we care about end of life at all? Well, two key reasons there. The first thing is life has a 100% mortality rate. At some point, everyone who is born will die, and the rate of aging and dying is increasing at a very rapid pace. We are an aging population, we're living longer, and we're dying older. And this is where the LDAC project comes into play. So LDAC, or End of Life Directions for Aged Care, is a project that provides information, guidance, and resources to the aged care sector to help them provide good quality palliative care and advanced care planning. Now, it's a project that's funded by the government, and it's run by a consortium. And you can see there from the logo, we've got 3 universities and 4 peak bodies that are running this project. Within LDAC, we've got 5 different streams of activities, one of which is technology and innovation. So what the technology and innovation stream of work, which is located at Flinders University in South Australia, what we do is we develop, test, integrate, and implement novel technology solutions to assist the Australian aged care sector in providing quality palliative and end-of-life care. But you may ask, well, hang on, we're talking about technology and we're talking about aged care and palliative care. Isn't technology more for, hi-fi, a bit of a fancy setting? Well, while it might feel like a bit of a mismatch, technology actually has a very big potential to offer the processes of palliative and end-of-life caregiving for the aged care sector. But why is that? Few things to remember. The first thing is there is a huge demand for the aged care sector. We're estimating that by year 2050, over 3.5 million older Australians will require some form of aged care service. So that's a massive demand. The other thing is that it's a very resource-intensive industry. The need for hands-on, regular daily support is absolutely essential for the aged care sector. And also, we are almost always in workforce shortages for this sector. The other thing to remember is that this sector very heavily intersects with the business of death and dying. The aged care sector provides support to a lot of older people who are in the last year of life, and almost half of over 65-year-old deaths occur in the residential aged care setting. So that's a huge number. And the other thing to also remember is technology is already making its way into aged care. We can see digital technology is being utilized in various aspects of aged care, aged care functioning, such as supportive technology, communication aids, learning and education, and clinical data management platforms. So given that given high cost of quality care and availability of only limited or finite resources, we really need to think of innovative ways to facilitate quality palliative and end-of-life care giving. And technology just brings one of these opportunities for bringing in innovation into end-of-life care and palliative care giving in the aged care sector. So what have we done within LDAC in terms of use of technology to support aged care? Well, we have 5 unique projects that serve very different purposes. And in this presentation, I will be focusing on the top 2 or the 2 major ones, which is the LDAC digital dashboard and the care worker app. But we also have the LDAC self-care room, which is designed to help care workers or support workers practice some self-care, and also the home care search filter and a projects database, which is essentially a tool that clinicians and managers could use to locate evidence and also national projects that are relevant in the context of aged care. So let's take a closer look at the LDAC digital dashboard. What is it? So in late 2019, we finalized the prototype of the LDAC digital dashboard. So this dashboard essentially is a web platform that serves as an automated system to capture and interpret salient data points relating to end-of-life processes and activities in aged care. So the principle at work here really is that aged care services already collect a huge amount of clinical data. And what the dashboard does is it provides them an architecture to interpret the data and present it back to the clinicians, which is meaningful in the context of end-of-life and palliative care giving. So it's really about providing that framework for picking up those relevant data points and for it to be presented back to the clinician. So the fact that data exists and having access to that data is bridged. So here you can see a little screenshot of what the dashboard looks like. There are some menu items on the left-hand side, and then there are also some sub-menu items that you can see. So why should the aged care sector even pay attention to or consider the LDAC digital dashboard? A couple of important things. The first thing is that it's very adaptable. It works within the processes and workflows that are already in place. The other thing is that it's not a standalone technology. It integrates very well with existing systems. Also, it's an evidence-based product. It's based on relevant aged care policy guidelines and evidence. Also, there is no need for duplicate data entry. The dashboard makes use of what's already collected within the clinical data management system of a service. And also the updates for clinicians and clinical managers is instant. There is no need to wait for summaries and prompts. So that's a bit of an information about the prototype itself. What have we done since we finalized the prototype? Well, post the release of the dashboard has been integrated by 4 different IT groups, and it has been made available across 15 residential aged care sites across Australia. And in the second half of 2020, we ran an implementation trial to see how this dashboard would function in the real world setting. So who participated? We had 14 of the 15 residential aged care services take part. And what we did was we ran a 3-month implementation evaluation trial. We provided some support to the services. We did some interviews with the staff. Then we asked them to use each site to use the dashboard for 8-week trial use period. And then we did interviews again with the site staff. We had 72 staff consent for the study, and 57 took part in the focus group or the interviews. So what did we find out? We found out that the LDAC digital dashboard provided an opportunity to support existing work processes. And that's really important, that it wasn't in conflict with what was in place. The dashboard presented a useful mechanism to prompt clinical action, to track care needs, and to enable reporting to the management of the service. And in one of the interviews, one of the nurses said that the dashboard was really useful for them to help them organize end-of-life care for their older residents. So that was some value aspect there of the dashboard. So I'm going to move on now to talk about the Care Worker app, which essentially is an app that we wanted to develop for care workers, or they're also known as personal support workers or personal care assistants or community support workers. They go by different names. But this essentially is a group of providers that are most heavily involved in day-to-day caregiving roles in the aged care sector. This workforce is unlicensed. They have very little training in end-of-life and palliative care, and they spend the most amount of time with the older person in their care interactions. So we felt there was an opportunity to support this workforce in identifying and understanding their clients' palliative and end-of-life care needs, and in reporting those needs or any change to relevant channels. So we aim to develop and evaluate an app that could support the Australian aged care workforce in caring for older Australians approaching the end of life. And this app, while it's currently in the technical building process, what we felt is that the technical build is just the tip of the iceberg. What underpins the technical building is a multi-step process to ensure that the app that we build for this workforce is evidence-based, rigorous, and is built in consultation with the end user. So what have we done? The first step we did was we felt it was really important for us to understand the app landscape. So we carried out 2 different systematic reviews. We did a systematic review of evidence on what's out there in terms of apps for care workers. And what we also did was we did a systematic review of apps out there across the 2 biggest app markets. So this really gave us an understanding of what's out there. Then once we realized and we found out that there wasn't much out there that we could just adopt, the need to build an app for care workers was really established. So that's when we moved on to the process of doing some interviews with care workers to ask them what would be most useful for them. What would they value when it comes to looking after their older clients and residents, and in the context of palliative and end-of-life caregiving. And once we collated what came out of the interview, before we even started the build process, we did some co-design exercise and user testing exercises to make sure that, the way we were thinking of, building the app with the information that was provided, from the evidence and from the interviews is actually coherent to what care workers and the care worker managers would desire. So that was the process that sat sort of underneath underneath the technical build. And once we did that, that's when we could proceed ahead to building the app in a technical way. That's where it's sitting at the moment with the developer. So what would be our next steps with this care worker app then? Well, the next would be to finalize the build, which we are expecting in the next 6 to 8 weeks. Then the next step would be to deploy the app to the app markets. We will obviously then be doing a lot of promotion to let the sector know that an app is there, and they could make use of this app. We will probably reach out to services and home care agencies to tell them that they can encourage their care workers to use this app. And then after a period of this app being out there and being used, we will then run an evaluation of this app to go back to care workers again and say, what do you think of this app? How can we make it better? Did it make any difference? Was it usable? And so forth. So while those are our next planned steps, we do very clearly see there are some notable value adds of this app. The first thing is that it's about supporting the interactions at point of care for care workers when somebody that they're caring for is or may be in the last year of their life. It's also important to remember that this app that we're building is not just about content to read or paragraphs for care workers to build their theoretical knowledge. It's actually quite interactive. It's about giving them actionable tips and sort of little things that they could actually implement in their caregiving processes. We also have included links to resources, so if they want to chase some further education and support, they can get that. And also there is an element of self-care, which is heavily needed for this workforce who care for those who are very vulnerable and also are known to have a lot of work pressures. So those were just 2 very quick examples of some of the technologies that we have built to support the aged care sector in the context of palliative and end-of-life care. But there is a bit more than what we have built and how we built them and what are the values. And I think the extra bit is about implementation, integration, and beyond. Because there's one thing to build a product, which may be fantastic, but another big piece of work that sits after that is about how do we go about integrating this and then implementing this, and then what happens afterwards. So I just want to share some of our experience from the technology and innovation work that we have done within LDAC. And the first key thing I think that we need to think of is access and adoption. What does it mean? For example, are the end users in control of the integration process? And this talks to access. How do we get the buy-in from the integrators if the integrators are not the end users? So, for example, in the dashboard's case, the end users are clinicians and care managers at the aged care service, but not every aged care service would have had the capacity to do an in-house integration. The IT company, which is a commercial enterprise, had the control over integrating it. So how do we navigate that was a big question. The other thing is the question to ask ourselves as technology developers, technology researchers, is the sector ready for this? Is palliative and end-of-life care, at the forefront of the discussions? Is the sector ready for technology-led approaches? And also the other thing, after a fantastic idea or technology is developed and integrated, what about implementation? What about the busy ward or the busy aged care setting where nurses work in, and they're very attention deficit and they're very time poor? Do we need to provide implementation support no matter how fantastic our piece of technology is? Those are very important considerations. Then the other step I think to think about is how do we promote widespread uptake? Because this is the bigger picture question of how do we navigate the access to and the conversations with people who are in the decision-making steps, or those who have the capacity and the ability and the willingness to actually have technology infused within the system to make it better. So again, those are very important considerations for us technology researchers and innovators. The other thing I think that I can share is our very personal integration and implementation experience from what we did with the dashboard implementation study. So for example, collaboration with IT sector and the aged care sector was really crucial for us. And that started way early when we were even developing the concept of the digital dashboard. So that whole idea of co-design approach to building, integrating and implementing technology is really, really essential. Also, it's very important important for us to remember that technology should work alongside processes that are in place. So, for example, terms and terminologies that we use within technology has to work well or has to be adaptable in a practice setting. It's not the other way around. Also, having a champion or a change agent or an implementation champion can really help technology uptake and use at a service level, especially when we're talking about health and aged care setting that is very busy. And also sometimes the patience is very, very necessary, because the time frame for us to progress from interested services to integrated services in some cases have been very, very long. And we really need to have those skills to keep that flame of the interest going. Very essential, very, very essential when it comes to things or, a setting such as aged care where, there is a lot of policy changes. There are, funding arrangements that change priorities overnight. So things such as, palliative care and technology, while essential, may be 4th, 5th, and 6th in the list and not number 1, 2, and 3. So it's really important to keep that interest going with the sector. So those were the lessons, but what has been the feedback for us from the sector, where it was really unanimous that a palliative care digital dashboard is a very welcome addition to the Australian aged care sector's technology offering. The dashboard really showed that it has the potential to help aged care services organize their end-of-life caregiving practices. And we are still getting ongoing interest from aged care sector on the dashboard. And, we've been asked to demonstrate the dashboard, and there are services and IT companies scoping out ways to have it integrated. So, we had, those were a number of exciting plans for dashboard to move forward, but I think we need to ask the broader question of where to from here for technology in aged care, not just LDAC or LDAC digital dashboard. Because I think, technology in aged care is perhaps, like what Victor Hugo said, an idea whose time has come. Maybe technology is in aged care is perhaps the next idea whose time has come. And as researchers and innovators and industry leaders, we need to embrace this idea, and I think we need to run with it. But we also need to keep in mind that what we build for the sector is evidence-based. It's built involving end users and with their needs and their environments taken fully into consideration. And we also need to never forget the ultimate goal of all of this exercise and these endeavors is to make an improvement in the care and experience of aging and dying older population. So I would just like to leave you there with that thought from Victor Hugo about, and think about whether technology is the next idea whose time has come in the aged care setting. And that brings me to the end of this session, and I'd be very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Priyanka, for your inspiring sharing. And we have quite a lot of questions, so let's look into it. So the first question will be, were there any user requirement change in between the product development stage and the application stage? So Priyanka, did you do any adjustment?
Thank you for that question. And also thank you very much for including me in this conference. So what we did and I would like to talk about the dashboard experience, where we had what we called a reference user group, which was like a group of stakeholders who really represented different, sort of groups from the sector. We had academics, we had managers, we had, workers, nurses who were part of the reference user group. And as we developed the prototype, every version went to this group for their review, and they gave us feedback, and we tinkered and played with the prototype and made amendments as per their suggestion. So we did about 5 or 6 rounds of these before we actually said, okay, we're happy with the prototype. Once the prototype was ready for integration, we also gave the IT groups the flexibility of integrating it as per the requirement of their system or their services. Again, really speaking to the need to, understanding and accommodating the need of the end users. But once the dashboard was implemented and it was ready, we as a group of researchers haven't done those changes, but we have given the services and the IT groups the liberty to make changes as as per their need. As far as the core foundations of the dashboard is kept intact, we have sort of said, tailoring as per the need of the site or the system is perfectly okay.
Thank you. So the other audience would like to know how the care workers perceive the impact. Did they react positively or did they show doubtful to it? And is there any extra steps?
So look, the Care Worker app is still in development stage, so we are yet to find out a bit more about it. But what I can tell you is I did all of the interviews with care workers in the pre-part of the Care Worker app development. And like I said, the technical build for us was just the tip of an iceberg. The big part of the activity for us in development was doing the 2 systematic reviews. And then we did a series of interviews with care workers and care worker managers. And we talked to them saying, look, hypothetically, if we were to build an app for you that looks at supporting your palliative and end-of-life caring practices, how would that be? And the reception towards that has been very, very positive. They said it would be fantastic. We are in need of support, not just in terms of information, but also actionable little tips. And part of that was also interviews with managers of care workers, especially in home care, which is not as structured as residential aged care in Australia. And the managers really loved the idea of it, and to the point where some of them said, look, once you build the app, if you could please come back to us, we will try and put it within our intranet, and the devices, the mobile phones we give to our care workers, we can potentially load your app already within it so they have easy access to it. So far, we've found it to be a very, very welcome sort of addition.
Good to know. So, okay, so the third question. The audience asks, over the years, have you observed any cultural changes, say within the companies or society, to invest in R&D for tech for palliative care? And why those changes? What do you think?
Look, I think there has been a very interesting sort of movement and transition into interest in technology. And what happened with COVID was that I think the not just the desire but the need to have technology ready and usable sort of went 10 years forward, at least in Australia. So we are at the stage where we are seeing a lot of interest from groups who say pre-COVID we probably wouldn't see that much. So I think, culturally, but also COVID sort of fueled interest in technology is very, very observable in Australia. And I think we thought that with COVID, it would be limited to, teleconsultation and video consultations. But what it actually did is it actually opened this door for people to be positive and open towards integrating technology. So that fear of, oh my God, we're not sure about technology is kind of, it's not gone, but it's sort of tapered down now. So people are way more open towards it, has been my observation.
Right, thank you for that. So we have another audience ask, shouldn't app development be an interactive in a back and forth fashion with end users tests rather than linear as described? So what do you think about that?
Yes, so that's a very important question. And so the way we are doing it is it's definitely not linear. What we're doing is we have and like I said, it was very hard to capture all of the processes within a 20-minute presentation where I'm presenting 2 different projects. But the process for the Care Worker app development was that, again, we have a reference user group who are care workers, care worker managers, service level managers, and experts from the sector and academics. So given our end users for this app are care workers, it kind of made sense for us to have our end users, the care workers, in the reference user group, and we kept going back to them. So, at the moment we are doing the technical build, but even before we did the technical build, shortlisting of the content, how do we know what needs to go in there? How do we know how it should be laid out? What would make most sense to care workers may not be something that we as academics prefer. So we really did that process of consulting with them, and also did, once we had said the wireframes ready, we again invited our reference user group to congregate and said, okay, we've got the wireframes, have a look at this, what do you think? So we absolutely did that back and forth process.
Exactly. The end user's experience is really important. So thanks again, Priyanka, for being with us today.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
首先好多謝阿 Miss Daryl Cady 同埋 Dr. Priyanka 同我哋分享佢哋寶貴嘅經驗啦嚇。我係賽馬會善寧之家 Dr. Jamie Wong 啦。我哋本身係一間非牟利嘅慈善機構啦，服務嘅對象咧都係末期嘅病人。咁而家末期嘅一個病人咧，其實都唔係淨係單止一啲叫做末期癌症嘅病人㗎，而家咧都會照顧到好多其他末期器官衰竭嘅病人，例如話本身有腎病啦，去到腎衰竭嘅情況啦，一啲肺氣腫啊 COPD 嘅情況啦，或者腦退化症 dementia 咁樣。甚至有啲係有啲神經系統嘅疾病，例如而家我哋都最近聽到話有漸凍症呢啲病人啊咁樣，我哋都會照顧唔同嘅病人嚇。而家呢個世代咧，其實就我哋都係離唔開科技嘅。咁香港亦都係一個即係科技好發達嘅城市啦。我哋日常嘅生活都會用到互聯網啊、智能電話啊、無線通訊啊，周圍都會有 WiFi 啊、有 Bluetooth 啊咁樣嚇。咁好多以前我哋都冇諗過會發生嘅嘢咧，但係而家呢啲科技咧都成為咗我哋生活嘅一部分。而家咧人口咧就越嚟越老化嘅。咁舒緩治療服務 Palliative Care 咧就變得越嚟越重要嘅。咁喺呢一方面嘅服務咧，其實香港都一路喺度發展緊啦。嚇，而家所有嘅公立醫院咧都有Palliative Care 嘅服務。我哋同埋啲政府嘅安老嘅院舍咧，都會好着重臨終照顧嘅教育啊，同埋提供呢啲服務。大家咧都好希望咧，就長者咧都可以喺佢自己熟悉嘅環境啊，有家人嘅陪伴啊，就舒舒服服咁樣可以走埋最後一程嘅。咁第一部分介紹嗰個 virtual reality 咧，其實喺end of life care 咧，我覺得係一個即係好有用嘅工具嚟嘅。咁VR 最大嘅優勢咧，就係可以即係用一個第一身啦，就走入去一個3D 嘅虛擬嘅環境，咁就可以親身感受到嗰個實際嘅情況嘅。好似影片入邊咧，就可以第一身啦，咁就進入去病人嗰個屋企入邊嘅，咁就同埋嗰個家人咧就一齊照顧嗰個臨終嘅病人，可以直接咧聽到家人嘅擔心啦，佢哋想知嘅問題啦，同埋照顧者點樣去解答佢哋嘅疑問啦。咁同埋都可以睇到咧，原來病人咧喺當中，即係臨終嗰個過程咧，佢都會有一個身體嘅狀況嘅變化，食咗止痛藥之後又舒服咗好多啊！咁其實呢啲咁嘅scenario 咧係可以俾一啲新嘅同事啊、學生啊都可以即係更加容易咁樣去學習嘅。咁呢幾年咧，其實COVID 疫情嘅影響啦，好多臨床嘅教學啦，好多嘅 placement 咧都停晒嘅，咁就令到好多學生咧都要即係留翻喺屋企嗰度學習嘅。咁就算話真係可以翻去臨床嘅學習咧，有時都要講下自己有冇咁嘅彩數咧，可以遇到一啲即係有學習價值嘅個案啊咁樣。同埋，如果我哋話好似要遇到呢啲咁嘅情況，個病人喺家中嗰度離世個過程，佢哋又會俾你上去睇咧，其實就即係好難遇到呢啲咁嘅個案嘅嚇。咁所以我覺得即係其實呢啲新科技咧，對於我哋臨床嘅學習咧，就真係即係好有用嘅。而家咧PC 嘅 service 咧，其實呢幾年都好着重去講呢個 advanced care planning 啦，講呢個 serious illness conversation 啦，同埋講一啲 communication skills 啊咁樣。咁都有好多嘅機構啊，會拍咗好多唔同嘅 video 去做呢啲教學嘅。 咁之前我就都有去唔同嘅醫院啦，同一啲醫生都做過一啲關於 serious illness conversation 嘅 role play 嘅 workshop 嘅。咁就發現咧，原來咧要啲醫生嚟上堂咧係即係好困難嘅事嚟嘅，因為啲醫生實在太忙啦嚇。咁每次咧我就只可以安排到2位醫生咧去真係做嗰個 role play 啦。咁同埋就要揾一啲即係同事啊去扮嗰個病人啊同埋家屬啊。咁就其實個成效就真係都唔係話咁理想嘅嚇。咁同埋即係都唔係話咁容易俾到好多唔同嘅醫生都可以即係有機會去參與到個 role play 啦嚇。咁我諗，如果將呢啲咁嘅video 啊，一啲 scenario 咧，加埋一個 VR 嘅模式去做一啲嘅 training material 啦，咁就會令到即係大家嘅學習咧都會更加 efficient 啊，同埋 effective 嘅。咁大家都知道，末期嘅病人咧，其實身體都即係好虛弱啦，佢哋嘅活動嘅空間可能就即係喺瞓喺張床度嘅，同埋可能喺嗰間房嘅幾步嘅啫。咁好多時個病人就嗰隻眼可能都係望住天花板啊，望到一個窗口啊咁樣嚇。咁我都見到啲病人咧，因為佢哋即係已經照顧唔到自己啦，去唔到自己想去嘅地方啦，身體嘅唔舒服啦，都令到佢哋即係個情緒都會低落嘅嚇。咁我覺得如果即係VR 可以真係用喺呢啲嘅病人身上啊，例如話可以幫佢哋去一啲佢哋好想去旅行嘅地方啊，可以帶翻佢哋去嗰個地方啊，咁同埋或者可以好似條魚咁樣，可以潛落個海底嗰度周圍遊去睇啊，或者讓一隻虛擬嘅動物啊，或者帶一隻狗仔去散步啊，即係其實呢啲都係一啲即係令到病人會好開心嘅嘢嚟嘅。咁同埋都可以話做一啲有啲 meditation 啊，或者做一啲嘅 relaxation exercise 啊，咁就喺即係用 VR 嚟做咧，佢哋嗰個感受係會深好多，好過淨係聽帶嘅咁樣咯嚇。咁即係希望呢啲科技咧，都係可以幫助到嗰個病人咧，擴闊到佢嘅生活空間啦。就希望佢哋即係唔會話覺得咁孤獨啊，咁即係咁唔開心啊，減輕佢哋嘅焦慮同埋抑鬱啦嚇。其實我自己就覺得VR 嗰個硬件咧就唔貴嘅，亦都唔難得到嘅。但係咧就要揀一個合適嘅題目啦，咁同埋即係中間嗰啲製作啊，同埋費用咧，其實先至係即係個 production 先至係最困難嘅嚇。第二部分咧就介紹嗰個 clinical dashboard 啦嚇，咁我覺得其實即係呢啲科技真係對臨床嘅工作咧就真係好重要嘅。咁我相信咧，如果喺開頭嗰陣時要 integrate 即係13間嘅老人院咧，嗰個系統咧真係一個即係非常challenging 嘅 project 嚟嘅嚇。咁 Palliative care 嘅工作咧，其實都係講係 involve 一個 multidisciplinary team 啦，咁入邊都有好多唔同嘅 team members 一齊做嘢啦，有護士啊、醫生啊、社工啊、即係物理治療師啊、職業治療師啊、volunteer 都有。咁如果有一個可以integrated 嘅 system 咧，就可以令到大家即係工作嘅時候咧，就好快知道另外一啲team members 究竟佢哋同個病人做咗啲乜嘢啊，咁都可以即時都喺嗰個系統嗰度即係見到啦。對一個 multidisciplinary team 嘅 work 係好緊要啦嚇。咁另外每一日其實即係醫護工作咧都要處理好多嘅 clinical data 啦嚇。咁其實真係好大量㗎嚇，香港咁多嘅病人嚇。咁而家醫管局入邊咧，本身公立醫院都有一個 CMS 嘅系統啦，嗰個就係嗰個clinical management system 啦，都用咗好耐㗎啦。咁呢啲即係系統咧，都處理即係好多病人嘅資料啊。咁我哋而家都好難想像話如果我哋即係去睇症嗰陣時，或者去開藥嗰陣時，我哋 揾唔到，即係個 CMS down 咗嘅時候咧，我哋都唔知即係點樣去處理即係咁多個病人嘅資料，所以而家都好即係清楚，其實呢啲平台係非常即係對我哋嘅工作係好緊要。同埋咧，呢啲即係資訊系統咧，其實收藏咗好多嘅大數據啦。咁如果可以即係幫佢處理翻出嚟咧，其實對於research study 啊，對於一啲 resources allocation 啊，對於個 management 咧都係即係好大嘅幫助嘅嚇。咁講翻下嗰啲apps 啦嚇，咁而家 apps 咧就即係好普遍嘅，我哋啲電話入邊咧都有即係10幾20個 apps 喺入邊裝咗啦嚇。咁 apps 嘅好處就係佢好容易 access 得到啦，同埋好多資訊咧都可以集中咗喺個 apps 入邊嚇。我哋個機構咧自己都有做到自己嘅 apps 嘅嚇。咁上面都有關於寫即係入邊有啲關於我哋機構嘅宗旨理念啊，我哋嘅服務係做緊啲乜嘢啊，我哋嘅會訊啊，咁都會放喺一個 apps 入邊。咁變咗家屬啊、病人啊或者市民咧，就想知道關於我哋機構嘅服務咧，就可以即係直接 click 入個 apps 咧，咁入邊就會好有系統咁樣即係講俾佢哋知啦。咁甚至就如果佢覺得佢哋想需要我哋嘅服務咧，其實 Apps 入邊已經有一張申請表，佢哋可以直接填咗咧，就可以即係 send 俾我哋，我哋就可以俾一個 service 佢啊咁樣樣。所以啲 Apps 咧就真係好方便嘅嚇。咁我哋其實院舍都有一個經驗，其實都有自己去 develop 一個臨床嘅電腦系統啦，因為我哋就唔係政府即係醫管局嘅機構啦，所以我哋都要自己去 develop 一個臨床嘅電腦系統。咁就其實即係去做呢個電腦系統咧，真係好困難嘅嚇。我哋都要即係之前最緊要係申請有一筆嘅經費啦，要錢啦嚇。咁就然後請一啲合適嘅 IT 嘅同事。咁嗰個部門咧嘅同事咧同IT 咧都要成日不斷咁樣開會，咁樣先至令到嗰個 IT 即係啲同事會知道其實我哋 clinical 係想即係做啲咩嘢啦，想需要咩嘢擺喺嗰個系統入邊啦嚇。咁同埋就好多嘢咧即係唔係講嘅嚇，好多嘢都要寫出嚟啦。咁我哋其實要預備好多，即係要寫好多嘅資料啦，好多 forms 啊。咁然後即係先可以擺入個系統入邊咧，而形成一個 framework 嘅。咁而且亦都要好着重有個 data protection 嘅嘢啦嚇。咁就唔可以話好隨便咁樣將病人啲資料會整得出去嘅咁樣嚇。咁所以其實 turn out 我哋都花咗即係1-2年嘅時間咧，由好細嚿嘢開始咧，先至可以即係而家叫做個系統就比較 smooth 啲，可以即係應用到啦。但係其實一路都要繼續update 啦，同埋一路都要加嘢上去嘅咁樣嚇。所以都係即係成個系統都係要 continuous 咁樣繼續做嘅。咁喺個過程之中咧，我就即係發覺咧，其實原來咧，即係醫護人員咧係好多人咧，連基本嘅 IT 嘢都唔識嘅。咁就 IT 嘅同事咧又唔明白，其實都唔了解即係醫護嘅工作，佢哋需要啲咩嘢嘅。所以即係整個過程咧都要即係好深入嘅溝通啊，開好多嘅會咧，就先至去做到呢啲咁嘅平台嘅嚇。咁但係完成咗呢個系統咧，就即係真係好方便嘅，因為咧同事喺任何一個地方咧都要可以即係 access 到病人嘅資料啦。而家咧就家訪嘅同事咧，只要帶住個 iPad 咧，就可以去探病人咧，都可以睇到最即係 update 嘅資料。咁總括而言咧，我覺得即係 technology 咧，其實就非常即係對於 end of life care 嘅工作咧係即係好有幫助嘅嚇。咁希望即係未來咧仍然都有即係相信未來都仍然有好大嗰個發展嘅空間啦。咁就因為即係要 develop 呢啲嘢真係唔簡單嘅，咁所以都即係希望政府啦同埋大學啦一啲科研啊 IT 嘅機構咧，即係都可以俾多啲支持啊 resources 啦去幫助即係我哋做呢啲咁嘅 technology 嘅嘢嚇。 咁但係無論如何啦，其實即係 technology 咧都唔可以 replace 到即係人與人之間嘅溝通嘅嚇。咁其實彼此嘅關心同埋照顧咧就科技係代替唔到嘅。咁就我諗我今日嘅分享咧就係咁多。咁多謝各位。